everyone, I'm Allegra Spender, the member for Wentworth, and thank you so much for coming this evening. Before I get too far in, I wanted to firstly pay my respects to acknowledge the land that we're meeting on, which is the Gadigal, Bidjigal, Birrabirragal people, the land of those people, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, as well as acknowledge any Torres Strait Islander or First Nations people here today. This has been a really, I think, difficult time for many Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people the last few weeks. So I think just being conscious of that and thinking of those people in our circles and how we support them through what's been a pretty tough time. So thank you so much for joining today on today's session on body image and eating disorders. This is a really important topic and one that I've been very passionate about and absolutely delighted and very proud to be here today and to be talking to you, having such an expert panel who's going to join me in a couple of minutes. So let me just kick off. In terms of why did I do this, there are a couple of standout moments, particularly in my time in politics, that really made me want to do this. I mean, growing up, I grew up in the East. There were a lot of eating disorders amongst my friends and my school companions. Like it was a significant part of my growing up. But I remember very vividly being just outside in the Bondi, just outside Pre-Pol in Bondi Junction. And this woman came out of Pre-Pol and she was holding her sort of 14-year-old-ish daughter by the hand, and she just said, look, she said, my daughter's been going through an eating disorder. It's been an absolute nightmare in terms of getting the support that I need. I voted for you. I want you to do something about it. And I've never forgotten that. I don't think I ever will. And then another lovely young woman came up to see me in Paddington. And I was, doing one of my sort of standing on the side of the street talking to people, and she said, look, I want to come and talk to you. She said, because, I've had an eating disorder, I've recovered from it, and one of my friends recently died. And she said, we're not doing enough. And she told me about her own experience of that and how difficult it was. So I just wanted to firstly pay tribute to those people for the bravery of speaking up about a really hard issue. And today is not just about eating disorders, it's about body image more broadly. But those were two very sort of meaningful and very powerful moments and really spurred me on to address this, which is part of the broader work that we're going to be doing around youth mental health. I'm a parent, I've got young kids, 7, 9 and almost 11. But when as a parent, the things I worry about so much is the mental health of my kids, as well as, I don't worry about so much physical health or, I'm lucky I haven't, but I don't, it feels like a safe area. There are a lot of things I don't worry about as much as perhaps other parents, but I do worry very much about the mental health of our young people, and because as a parent, it seems sometimes you feel powerless in terms of what you can do. So this is very much around supporting families, carers, friends, and getting us across as a society better prepared and better able to effectively engage with our friends, with our kids, with our nieces, our nephews about these really important topics. And I said that's my personal connection, but also when I speak to young people, I get a group of student leaders from all the different schools together, one in the year 6 group and one in the upper years of high school. And consistently, when I ask those groups, what are the most important issues for young people in this area, mental health really tops the list. And again, body image, and really is high on that list. And I'm very grateful to particularly that high school group who gave me some sort of good guidance and pointers about what we should be considering today and what we should be worrying about. So let me, I'll talk briefly about the statistics here. The Butterfly Foundation has done the Body Kind Youth Survey, and that was a survey with 1,600 young people aged between 12 and 18. And some of the findings are pretty shocking and really echo the sentiments I've heard from the community, which are really that more than 90% of young people have concern about their body image. That almost 70% of young people said they have experienced appearance-based teasing, with 73% saying they experience it at school. So this is something that is live and that is happening at school. And nearly 2/3 of young people said their body image is stopping them from doing physical activities. And nearly 50% of young people said how they view their body has prevented them at some point raising their hand in class, just engaging in education. And it's absolutely shocking, and that is why this is such an important issue to address. And we do know that those most severe, or some of the severest forms of eating disorders, including anorexia, anorexia has the highest mortality of any mental illness that we have, and that is absolutely frightening. So today, the purpose of this forum is to be practical. The goal of this forum is really to give families, friends, carers tools about how they can support their children, especially in prevention, during times of immense body image issues across young people. We're going to talk about practical things like how can you broach the subject of body image with your kids, how do you encourage a positive relationship with food from early on, warning signs to look out for, how to support your whole family if one of your children is experiencing body image issues. We're also going to be talking about what are the services available in the community, and we will have time for questions from the audience. Because we've done a handout, I know many would have picked that up, because we feel that we need some practical tools for parents, carers, educators and friends to help prevent and address body image issues and eating disorders. But we also need professional help from mental health community and government response. And, we're not going to be it's not going to be really focused on the policy, broader policy work, but I want to let you know that in the crossbench, this is a really important topic for members of the crossbench. And Zoe Daniel in particular has been leading this from the start. She's a member for Goldstein. So she has been advocating very, very strongly with the health minister, and so far we've received a really big boost in funding, particularly for eating disorders, including on research. But there is so much further we need to go on this. So from a policy point of view, we're really working on to say what are the major levers in terms of funding, in terms of mental health funding and those sorts of issues. But today is really about some of that practical support, and any other policy ideas that come up today, I'll be feeding back into with Zoe and others, because it's a really important issue. We're also on the crossbench getting together, Zoe's been leading this with some of the social media platforms about, including Meta and others, about how does social media feed into body image and eating disorders, because that's absolutely critical, and we do need to look at what are we doing at that commercial end that is actually enforcing and reinforcing these bad images, and what can we do to make a difference there. So these are some of the sort of national policy pieces that we'll be doing. But tonight is really focused on the practical differences that we can make. We're going to start with a short presentation today from Helen Rydge from the Butterfly Foundation, who's going to give some useful outlines of the definitions of topics we're talking about and give us a starter. And then we're going to be moving on to a panel discussion with some amazing panellists, and then invite questions for all of you. Now, I'm conscious that a number of you in the audience may have had lived experience, either personally or with family and friends. And so if, for whatever reason, you find this too much and you'd like to have a moment to step out, there is a room through that door, not just, it says the toilets, but beyond there is a nice room where you can sit down and take a break. I'm conscious that some people may have had very significant lived experience in this. It might be you might find this topic, the way we're approaching it, not at the level of your lived experience and not at that level. We are trying to do something that fits for the broader community, for people who perhaps don't know much about this yet and are trying to look at that sort of prevention and early intervention piece. But still very happy to hear, I'd love to hear, as always, thoughts and comments from those who've had more significant experience as well. But I'll sort of talk about that Q&A when we get to it, but firstly, let me introduce Helen. So she's worked with the Butterfly Foundation for 9 years, leading their work in schools and communities across Australia, which has contributed to Butterfly's reach to over 1.7 million students and over 15,000 professionals and parents. Helen has managed the development and dissemination of programs and initiatives at Butterfly, including Body Kind Schools, Body Kind Families, and Australia's first national survey onto body image, which I was just talking about, the Body Kind Youth Survey. She has a background in young people's health promotion, having worked in policy for the UK government and service delivery roles for over 24 years. So welcome to the stage, Helen, and then I will, once you're done, I will present, have our other wonderful panellists up on stage, and I'll introduce them as well. Thank you.
Hopefully I've got a good microphone, yes. Thank you so much, Allegra, for the introduction, and welcome everyone. It's wonderful to see so many of you here tonight investing in the young people in your lives. I appreciate that there's a whole range of people joining us this evening, parents, carers, people that work with young people, of all genders, all ages and cultures. As Allegra has, I'd also like to acknowledge the presence of lived or living experience of mental health conditions and eating disorders. That's really at the heart of what we do at Butterfly. It connects us back to our origins, connects us back to our founder, and of course the people that we serve. And really what we seek to do is to amplify that voice of lived experience to bring about change. As Allegra said, tonight is about sharing some information about body image and some strategies to support our young people. But of course, body image and eating disorders, whilst they're not the same thing, they're very closely related. We know that body dissatisfaction plays a significant role in their development. So, as Allegra said, if you need to step out or if you need to take a moment, please do. We're all different. If you're just not having a great day for whatever reason, that's absolutely fine. Butterfly's national helpline is available to anyone 7 days a week from 8 AM until midnight, so feel free to reach out. I see myself as very fortunate. I recognise the body privilege that I have. I also recognise that I grew up in a time where I would have maybe access to a Jaimee magazine. I think the Australian equivalent is Dolly. I'd have access to a Jaimee magazine every few months. I grew up in a household where food, appearance and bodies just wasn't really talked about, apart from being clean and tidy and having your hair combed. And food in our household was just a matter of the best that we could afford at the time. But I recognise that the children and young people that the society that they're growing up in is very, very different. The subtle and really not so subtle messages that they're receiving about their bodies, their health, their weights, has never been so intense. This is the first generation to have grown up not knowing social media. And it's that constant bombardment that is making it really hard for our young people, well, for all of us really, to be content with our lives, content with our bodies, to see our bodies as something that is precious, valuable and worth taking care of. And it's also giving us some really kind of warped and weird ideas when it comes to health and well-being. A great place to start this evening, and when we're trying to help our young people, is to understand what we mean by body image. So body image is thoughts, feelings and attitudes a person has about their physical appearance. So it's not necessarily based in reality, it's a perception, it's a thoughts and feelings. And that in turn drives the behaviours that we engage in. And our body image is not going to be static, just like our body is going to change through the course of our lifetime. So our feelings about our body are going to change too. So we know from the research that there are key times where our body image is likely to be challenged. And for our young people, that is during puberty. But it's also that transition to tertiary education for women during pregnancy or menopause, and if we're injured or ill. So if we feel distress or shame about our body, or if we have whole beliefs that certain body types or certain body shapes are more worthy or more valuable, it's very easy to see how that impacts the way we treat our body. And the problem is that body dissatisfaction actually holds enormous power over the choices that we make. It makes it really hard for us to accept our body the way it is right now and in that moment of time. And it makes us feel like we need to change our body. And the world that we live in, the diet culture messages are coming at us every which way. And that's telling us the quick fixes about how we can change our body. And for women, primarily that means shrinking or reducing their body size. And for men, it primarily means being more muscular or leaner. On the plus side, because it is about thoughts and feelings, we do have the power to change those, and that's a really empowering message we can share with our young people. So we can help young people, although it's pretty hard and lots of concerted effort, we can help them to have a more positive relationship with their body, and maybe even just feel neutral about their body. Of course, there are lots of factors at play when it comes to body image, internal and external. So the extent to which certain personality traits, so we know people with high perfectionistic tendencies, people who are prone to high levels of anxiety, the nature and frequency of body comparisons, the extent to which somebody internalises the belief that thinner or leaner or muscular bodies are better, the language that our young people are exposed to, the values within our friendship groups, our homes, our schools, our online world, the messages we receive in social media all play an important part. And the really sad thing is that our children, as humans, as our children, we are really growing up in a difficult time. And as humans, we are absolutely hardwired to have negative thoughts and to be judgmental about ourselves. And generally, those negative thoughts come and go. But when it comes to our teens, when they don't know how to deal with those negative thoughts, and those negative thoughts don't go away, and those bad days become every day, and it starts to impact on every aspect of their life, that's when we've got a problem. As I said, children are growing up, very weight-centric health and beauty messaging. So we know that very young children are beginning to be unhappy with their body. So children as young as 3 are already exhibiting or articulating negative qualities to people in larger bodies. We know that body image concerns between the ages of 5 and 7 predict dieting behaviour by the age of 9. And we know that dieting is the #1 risk factor for the development of an eating disorder. Pretty consistently, the research, I know Allegra talked to the Body Kind News survey, but within younger children, the research consistently points to about 50% of pre-adolescent girls, so that's 8 to 11-year-olds, being dissatisfied. And when you drill down to that dissatisfaction, it's actually about wanting to be thinner than they are. And research in males is increasing, so there is one study, for example, where 33% of 6-year-old boys wanted to be more muscular. Our own Body Kind Youth survey, which Allegra spoke to, pointed to that ongoing prevalence of body dissatisfaction in Australian youth, and it really does impact our females, our gender diverse, and our LGBTQI youth to a much greater extent. And outside of eating disorder risk, as Allegra said, body image has the potential to impact on every aspect of a young person's life. So this isn't something that's a bit trivial and fluffy. It's actually holding our young people back from being who they can be in life. And I promise you, when we talk to young people, we take a really strength-based approach. And I know it can be really quite dismal when we hear the statistics and see how much our young people are struggling. So what we're really trying to do at Butterfly with our prevention efforts is that we really want to help every young person, every child and every young person thrive in the body that they have, socially, emotionally, physically and mentally. And we also want to be able to intervene earlier as and when problems do arise. So through our programs and initiatives, so the presentations that we do to thousands of young people every year, our body image program for primary schools, we're really trying to arm young people with the information, the knowledge and the skills to push back against all that societal expectations and pressures. But of course, we know that that's incredibly difficult for an adolescent when it's all about fitting in. And we understand why so many find it really difficult, that they just can't do that. So the second aspect of Butterfly's work in the prevention space is really to try, and this is through our Body Kind initiative, is really trying to create positive environments for young people. Environments where there are policies, that's their homes, their schools, their families, their sporting clubs, their online world. And it's about ensuring that there are positive role models for young people, that there are policies and education and awareness programs in place, and importantly, people who've had training in understanding what warning signs are and how to act early. And then the final thing that we need to change, I know Allegra said we won't go into dwell on that, but the final thing that Butterfly is also part of is really just trying to change our world when it comes to the messages that we're receiving around bodies, weight, shape and appearance. And we need to work with businesses, governments, social media platforms, as Butterfly does, to try and really bring about change in our society, because quite frankly, if we don't, it holds our young people back. So I'm really looking forward to unpacking some of these themes with everybody here tonight. I just want to say you're about to be introduced to an expert panel, but please remember, you are the experts on your family, your children, your schools, your workplaces. So please take what you will from tonight and apply your own cultural lens, your own parenting style, your own school ethos, and make it work for you. Again, if anyone's troubled by anything that's happening tonight or just wants to reach out for some support, Butterfly is available.
Thank you.
I think this was the button. Well, look, thank you very much, Helen, for those really helpful words. Let me introduce the rest of the panel. So I'm going to start with you, Helen Rydge, if you could come and join us. So Dr. Helen Rydge is a clinical psychologist who's worked with clients with eating disorders and body image concerns for 20 years across a range of public and private settings. She was formerly the clinical lead at the Inside Out Institute, Australia's national eating disorder research and clinical excellence institute. In addition to seeing clients and families directly, Helen provides supervision and consultation to other clinicians and eating disorder services across Australia. And she's passionate about improving the outcome of people with eating disorders. So thank you, Helen, for being here. Then I'd love to have Isabella Griggs, if you'd like to come up. Isabella's grown up in the eastern suburbs, attending Bondi Beach Public School and Randwick Girls High School. She's witnessed Bondi's change over the last 27 years and endured the societal pressures and expectations that have come alongside with this. Having overcome a eating disorder in her teenage years, Isabella is working towards making a career to help young adults in their journey with body image and self-worth. Having just finished her Bachelor of Counselling, well done, at the Australian College of Applied Psychology, she's working to pursuing this passion with passion and purpose and advocating for youth mental health. So thanks so much, Isabella, for joining us. And lastly, Jaimee Krawitz, if you'd like to come up. So Jaimee's a registered counsellor working in private practice. She's the CEO of the newly established not-for-profit called Hide and Seek. Hide and Seek is on a mission to create an open language of conversation, raise awareness and provide invaluable support and resources to caregivers of individuals experiencing an eating disorder. Jaimee has also compiled a resource ebook called The Language of Seeking Help, which is a resource for caregivers on how to support an individual experiencing an eating disorder. So thank you so much, Jaimee. We do have a women panel, which is unusual, and deep down we should have had a more gender diverse panel, so I will apologise for that we should actually genuinely have, but I have to say it's an amazing group of women here, so I'm very grateful that you've all joined. I'm going to start just with the first question. So we're going to do some questions here, and then we're going to go to the audience at a certain point. But firstly to the two Helens. So how do I broach the subject if I'm concerned about my child? Where do I start?
I might just go to grab my notes I left on Jaimee's chair. Just ask. I think the stats that we heard today, with 90% of young people having concerns, the chances are the young people in your life, this is something that's going on for them. But it's not something they might spontaneously bring up. In fact, we know that they often will not bring up concerns about body image or eating on their own. So asking the questions. We can be scared that might open Pandora's box or cause anything. That's not going to be the case. Just opening that dialogue will allow for anything to come up, for us to correct anything, for us to look at how they're mistaking things. So I think there's a tendency as a parent to reassure, isn't there? So if your young person says, I feel ugly or my stomach feels fat, to go, oh, darling, you're fine, you're beautiful. But that's not really helpful, is it? It's so dismissive of the distress. So I think there's an opportunity, if we hear that talk from young people or from our children or people around us, to say, to go into that distress, say, what's going on for you? Can you tell me a bit about that? Like, that sounds like it's really upsetting to you. You know, I know we're talking about body image and not eating disorders, but a study that was published earlier this year by some colleagues showed that the time between the onset of symptoms and actually getting help for eating disorder is about 5 years, which is shocking. And so if we don't have these conversations, you know, this is why this happens. So having a conversation about body image with young people, if there is anything more sinister going on, if it is an eating disorder developing, they're probably more likely to be able to have that conversation with you.
Helen, did you want to add anything as well?
That was a great answer. I would also just like to say that, you know, sometimes it's okay to have a bad body image day. It's okay to have a bad body image moment. So sometimes we just need to let our young people sit in those feelings for a bit. And like Helen said, we don't necessarily have to rush to kind of fix a solution. And for very young children, there is sometimes a tendency to use words like, I feel fat or I feel ugly, when they don't necessarily have the language to explain bigger emotions. So sometimes we can, as a parent, hear that, like you say, want to immediately rush in and reassure. But you have to think about your language, whether that language that you're using to reassure is whether that's actually reinforcing ideals, body ideals, or reinforcing weight stigma. So let them have their little moments, try and stay calm, and the idea really is to be curious. You want to develop a relationship, or continue to develop a relationship with your child where you're being curious, empathetic, and non-judgmental. I know that's really hard to do as a parent sometimes. And even if you give the best possible response, or if you're talking to your child and you feel like you've really nailed it, 9 times out of 10 your teenager is going to sit there and roll their eyes at you. So it may not land well with them, but you're giving it a red hot go, and that's the most important thing. Try to open up the conversation, but revisiting. And it's not only what you say and how you talk to your young person, it's about what you do in your home or what you do in front of young people. So you don't necessarily have to have that overt body image conversation with your young person, but you can send a lot of really positive messages through the way that you acknowledge and celebrate other bodies, the way that you talk about your own body in front of your child, the way your approach to eating and movement. You just send so much by those non-verbal signals.
Just with that question I've just asked, how young are you talking about this? You know, like, do you start with your, you know, I've got a 7-year-old, do you start with that young age? You know, what do you do here?
I have 2 children who are 11 and 13, forgot them for a minute. I probably don't just start talking about it, but if there is something that, if they came home and expressed a concern, or if they made a negative comment about someone else's body or about bodies in general, I'd pick that up too. It's not just about their own, but trying to work on weight stigma just generally. So it's just looking for those opportunities when you can have that conversation rather than kind of going, hey, how do you feel about your body today? Yeah, we won't land as well.
So then I want to ask Jaimee and Isabella, you know, the question about language. You know, what language should we use? What language should I not use? You know, and what if they get annoyed? You know, teenagers particularly, but even, you know, kids of all ages, you can feel like you're hitting walls. You know, so how do we, you know, from that language point of view, what would you suggest? What's the evidence?
Just turn it on. Just try turning it on.
Yeah.
When it comes to using appropriate language with someone who's experiencing an eating disorder or experiencing negative body image as well, a lot of the time we don't always know what to say, whether it's to a child or whether it's to an adolescent, whoever it may be who's experiencing these issues. A lot of the time, I think it's important to use the I statements. So focusing on the individual and saying to them, I can either see what's going on and I can see you're not yourself, and focusing on the behavior rather than the physical approach, instead of saying, you know, you look, whatever the case may be, or you're not looking good, or you're not looking this. It's rather saying, I'm noticing that you're not yourself. I'm noticing that you've gone introverted. I'm noticing that you haven't come out, or you aren't being your usual self. If the person does respond and they get angry, as an educator, as a parent, as a carer, you don't also always know what to say, because everyone has their own journey, and as humans we sometimes don't always know what to say. But I do think when you ask the person and you say, I may not understand what you are going through right now, but I want to understand, and I want to understand your needs, and I want to understand how I can be there for you as well. That changes a lot, because it gives the person an understanding to really respond and to say, wow, okay, this person's here with me and they're really wanting to understand me. And also that opens up another open dialogue with someone else where you can feel comfortable to bring up something maybe you haven't brought up in the past as well. So if someone does get angry or they do get frustrated on what you're saying, I think it's also okay to be patient with the person and to be patient with yourself as well, because as a parent, as a carer, as an educator, you're also learning to understand another individual's needs as well. So we don't always know what to say, because not everyone is the same and everyone has their own experience. But when you do ask and you do phrase these questions and saying, I'm really wanting to understand where you're at, I'm wanting to understand what you need from me as well, instead of just phrasing like, you need to do this and you need to act in this way, and if you did this, this could really help you. Because as a parent, I mean, it's not always their profession as well, but what they can do is they can support you and they can show a sign of faith.
Thank you.
Yeah, similar to what Jaimee said, I would also just be conscious of how you feel when you're approaching the conversation. So you may have had a long, stressful day, you get home, make the kids dinner, all of a sudden it's not gone the way you want it to go. That stress bucket is already so high, and that's when you might say something that might just land the wrong way. They take it the wrong way, you feel like you've not done the right thing, you've not said the right thing, all of a sudden everyone's in a shame spiral and no one knows what to do, and that can be a really easy way to go, oh, I can't approach this again. For someone who's experienced it as well, I can speak from the experience that if the people that you care the most about are frustrated because they want to help but they don't know how, that can put a pressure on you to feel as though I'm just going to not talk about this because I don't want to hurt the people closest to me. So to be able to remove that as much as you can, as many times as you need, and that might take stepping away from the situation, decompressing, coming to it again when everyone is in a more level-headed state of mind, opening the conversation, opening the dialogue again when you feel comfortable, because they're going through something, but you love these people as well, so you're going through something as well. So it's important to remember that, yes, it is an issue for them, but you're trying to manage that as well, and that's not something that should be neglected also.
So one question then is to so perhaps Helen and Isabella, Helen Rydge and Isabella, how do you encourage a healthy relationship with food from early on, during family meal times in other ways? I had someone recently tell me, a bit to your comment, Helen, that, be careful about how you speak about your own body in front of your kids, because that's, that can feed back to them. So, I'd just love to say, what do we do as parents, as carers, to help, make that work?
Look, I think, the obvious things we all know we should try and do is to, make healthy, varied eating a general part of everyday family life, make activity a general part of family life, make all the different kinds of foods we enjoy, trying not to label foods as good or bad or having judgment calls on them, treat food or, junk food, it's just all food. And we might choose certain things because of their nutrition and focusing on that for health, for strength. But I think the other thing really talks to what Allegra was saying is being aware of your own relationship with food, because a lot of things we know, but it can be hard to implement. because we have our own value judgment around food or our own thoughts around our own bodies and dieting or what we should be eating or how much we should be eating, that can just implicitly be passed on to the young people around us. So I think having really taken check of our own relationship with food can then help us foster a healthier one with our children.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think as well, consistency is really important. Normalising meal times, normalising routines, having things so life essentially just continues on. You know, those breakfast, lunch, dinner, it kind of just carries through. If something doesn't go to plan, then nothing changes because of that. It's always just, we're just eating at the table together is amazing in a sense, because it's, again, normalising that. But working with each other when it's not that simple as well, like taking every day as an individual day, and if one day goes really well and then the next day it doesn't, it's not allowing that day that's gone well to just stop everything. It's just continue on, you try again, and that will continue to normalise the behaviours and the thoughts.
Tell me, what are the warning signs, again maybe to the two Helens, of that families and educators should be considering and looking out for young people, and when they should escalate or talk to their child or student?
That's sometimes tricky because the warning signs are different for everybody. And some of the warning signs, it's hard to kind of unpick what's kind of normal childhood or teenage behaviour and what's something that's more problematic. So the problem with something like an eating disorder is by the time that those signs have become visible, you know, by the time they reach the surface, there's so much going on underneath. So really that's just a visible expression of the pain and the suffering that the person's going through. So you keep your eyes peeled, but for something like body image concerns, you might start seeing a young person articulating more. So they might be sort of, you know, saying, I feel X, or I feel fat, I feel ugly, or I wish, and I'm using I wish statements a lot. They might start comparing themselves a lot more, so they might use lots of comparative language to their friends, to their siblings perhaps. You might notice them engaging in some more body checking behaviours, so maybe spending some more time in front of the mirror, looking at reflective surfaces a lot. If you have scales in your house, they might be jumping on the scales more often than not. They might also be taking a long time to be able to get out, get ready in the morning, because they're spending a long time on their appearance and not feeling satisfied, or they're really focusing on imperfections and flaws. You might also see them changing their clothing style. They might be wearing more clothing, less clothing. You might see them changing their eating patterns. So they might be eating less in front of others. They might be eating in secret. There's a whole range, just so many warning signs that it's both physiological, psychological, behavioural, and there's a lot of information available to parents and teachers and educators. Obviously, I would suggest Butterfly Helpline is a great place to start when you really want to drill down to what those warning signs look like.
I think that was quite a comprehensive list from Helen. Just the other thing I was thinking about is avoiding, you know, if there are things they used to do or sports they used to take part in or not wanting to go to a party, that's a pretty clear sign that something might be going on. It might not be body image stuff, it might be anxiety or other concerns, but some of those behavioural things where they're actively changing what they're doing could be warning signs. Thank you.
So talking, next question is about the preventative measures that families can take in terms of the language they use and what prevention measures that schools can take. Maybe Jaimee, could you kick us off and then come to Helen?
So when it comes to preventative measures in families, one of the things I'm linking back to again is the emphasis on language and communication. Firstly, bringing in healthy communication in our household, so avoiding any type of judgment or any type of conversation that could lead to frustration or any commenting about any physical behaviour as well. I think also focusing on positive reassurance about someone's behaviour and what they've achieved. Just for instance, just saying someone's come home from school and they've had a big day, but rather saying like, tell me what you achieved at school today, and not only focusing on anything that could be quite physical, rather focusing on the behaviour side of things and focusing on those type of achievements as well. I think that's a big thing as well. Letting go of any type of conversation that could lead to any type of negativity, as well as any form of judgment as well. And when you open up that dialogue as well, that's also opening up a really safe space in your home for the individual to say, I've been feeling whatever the case may be. And then when someone's opening up that conversation, that creates a really open and safe dialogue in the home for the child to feel comfortable to explain what they're feeling and when they're feeling certain situations as well.
So just so I understand that properly, so what are you saying, that instead of saying, well done on your test, well done on, your sports result or something like that, you're saying focus more on the behaviours rather than the sort of the sort of achievement that has the outcome of the behaviours, is that right?
Yeah, like even just saying, what goal did you achieve today? And I know you were focusing on achieving you set 3 goals for yourself today. Tell me a little bit about that as well. And not only focusing on, I know you wanted to do, if it's a physical response to something, and it's like at school, I know you were saying that you wanted to go and do some form of exercise, you're only focusing on something that could lead to a form of body image, but it's more leading to a sign of focusing on, I did really well at school because I was able to stand up and speak in front of my classroom, and focusing on the little things that give someone a form of positive reassurance as well.
Thank you. Helen, what's your perspective in terms of what the preventative measures schools can be taking, as well as families?
Well, firstly, schools are doing an incredible job. Educators do an incredible job day in, day out, because they have just so much thrown at them all the time. So I'm always astounded about the amount of educators who reach out to us, who are really trying to do their absolute best for their students in so many areas of well-being, but particularly around body image and eating disorders. I think my first message is for the kind of education space is that, it needs to start young, certainly in the primary school years, and we obviously don't need to be talking about body image per se in primary school age children. We certainly don't want to be talking about eating disorders with primary age children, but we want to be laying the foundations to having that really positive relationship with our body, and positive relationship with health, eating and exercise, being able to celebrate the difference and diversity in our world and seeing that as a real positive. We obviously need education to be ongoing, so like a number one-off tick box. And there's, school wellbeing programs address many of the things that would have an impact on body image without necessarily having to talk specifically to body image. But yes, we would love schools to have body image education and awareness programs available to students of all genders and all sexualities. But if schools weren't able to do that, if they were just able to remove some of the really harmful practices that they inadvertently are happening in our schools, perhaps in lack of understanding. So we're still seeing students being weighed at schools, we're hearing the students being asked to calculate BMI as part of a maths lesson. We're still hearing students being asked to keep food diaries and keep a track of their calorie intake. So if we could just remove that from our schools, then that would be a really positive thing for lots of young people, not just those that are vulnerable to eating disorders. The other big thing that schools can do is really take that zero tolerance approach to appearance-based bullying and teasing, because we know that has a really significant impact on body dissatisfaction, and people with a lived experience can often pinpoint their one of the triggers for their eating disorder back to an incident around body shaming or body bullying. So our schools really need to be a safe haven for all young people, and they need to have those referral pathways in to support families and students who need that access to ongoing support and care.
Jaimee and Isabella, social media. What's the role that social media is playing in this? And again, what can we do to help, particularly our young people as they engage with social media?
I think it's pretty safe to say that social media plays a very large role, but unfortunately it's unfair to assume that it's something that's going to go away anytime soon, especially with adolescents. They might leave, they might go on the bus and they're on their phones for the whole day. So it's not something that is sort of measurable and you're able to just kind of take that away and all of a sudden all of that stimulus disappears. But as Helen explained at the beginning, a lot of the issues that are created are derived from thoughts. You go on social media, you scroll for 20 minutes, all of a sudden your thoughts are heavily impacted by what you've been looking at for the last 20 minutes. And kids might not be aware of that, and I think creating that awareness, and that might not be from parents, that might be when you bring someone out or they speak to external sources, and that's totally fine, but the more that they can understand that their thoughts are being impacted by this sort of stimulus, which is then impacting their behaviour and they're trickling on that effect, that is a massive, massive part of how I came to understand, how people I know came to understand, and it creates this divide of like, all of a sudden you realise, all of a sudden, that sounded like it was really simple, it's not, but it is a step-by-step process where you begin to understand that what you're looking at on that screen is not actually your reality. And someone can say 1,000 times, Instagram's a highlight reel, blah, blah, blah. And we know it's true, but we sometimes really can't fathom that, especially when we're in the thick of it. So I think continually having the conversations, as they said at the beginning, again, become curious with how people are feeling with it, open the dialogue, ask questions rather than statements, rather than close-ended questions. Create conversation around it so it can be more normalised, because unfortunately social media, again, it's not going anywhere, but it is something that we can start to work with over time.
Leaning off what you just mentioned, you encapsulated that very well, but I think also one of the things as well is also with media, with the media literacy around this as well, is also understanding what is out there and having conversations, even just say, if it's with your child, if it's with your friend, and turning around and saying, I saw this on social media, what are your views on this? Or I saw this today, what do you think about this discussion? And then it's kind of grappling a conversation, opening up the conversation and saying, well, I didn't love how this was perceived, or I didn't love how that was perceived. And when you create that conversation as well, I think a lot of the time people just see things and it shifts perspective, but when you create the conversation, you also gain knowledge on what other people are thinking and other people are feeling, and that can also shift your perspective as well. But also with social media, as you said, there's a lot of things that are out there that people can, they can compare themselves. They're not always going to feel the greatest when they see other people, but there are amazing platforms as well at the moment that are promoting body positivity as well. And I think it's really important to have those conversations and to say to someone, oh, I did see this link today, and I did see that this person is promoting this conversation. What do you think about that? Leaning back to that conversation again and saying that. So we learn on social media a lot of the time when we look at things as well. I mean, I'm looking at social media just to learn as well a lot of the time, to engage, to be educated, to gain awareness as well. And obviously it has that tint as well, but when you look at it and you're shifting your perspective and you're sharing that message as well to people around you to say, well, if you looked at it in this perspective, you could also see that there's a message behind this as well, and we can learn about this as well. Then that also makes a shift in the relationship with social media, and you actually can build a positive relationship and approach towards looking at things in social media as well.
And one question is, I think what do you do if you're in a family and where one of your children has a body image challenge or issue, and you're scared it's going to affect your other children, or perhaps their friends do. I know that particularly around eating disorders, there's a real concern that is socially transmitted. It is something that it's how you address it is actually really difficult. So I'd love to talk about that both in the sort of family, sort of friend circle, but also in that sort of school circle as well. How do you think about that? This is open mic. Anyone can start with this one.
I suppose if you're worried about the impact on other siblings, I think it's just important to sort of share with them, in an age-appropriate way, maybe what's going on for their brother or their sister, and just encourage them to be kind and compassionate and supportive, which I know is not always easy for some siblings, but also just to make sure that they aren't exacerbating the issue by any appearance-based teasing or bullying or language within the home, really. So yeah, just be open and upfront and age appropriate about that. And then when it comes to our schools and our young people who have friends that are maybe back in the school environment recovering from an eating disorder, our advice is always just to continue to treat them like your friends. Continue to invite them along to things. They may not want to or be ready to kind of socialise fully with you yet, but leave the door open. Know that you're there for them. And we do a lot of work to try and help young people understand that their friend is not their eating disorder, and that actually that there is hope and that there is their friend will come back to them and will be able to recover. So we do a lot of work around that with young people to make sure that people with eating disorders still included.
Thank you. Other comments?
This is linking back to when we first spoke about, what sort of language we can use as well. I mean, one of the missions behind the organisation that I've just launched, Hide and Seek, is using the right dialogue to support someone who's experiencing an eating disorder. And as teachers, as friends, as parents, we all want to be educated and gain that awareness on how to comfort someone who is struggling. So again, when it's teaching a certain approach or even just understanding what the person is going through and saying, I'm here to guide you through this direction, and also just learning what the person may need at that time. I mean, that really shows so much connection, because at the time you may not be able to help straight away, but by showing respect, by showing empathy, by showing that you're there and showing up, I think that makes a huge difference to the person who's really struggling at that time as well. And when you're being taught, also not what to say as well, and to be guided in a direction where you can make a really positive difference. The little words that you use along the way can go a long mile, because even if it's a little comment that you say and you don't need to say it, the other person on the other line could take that really personally, and that could create a ripple effect as well.
Can you give some examples?
An example of just saying to someone, I can notice that, to someone who's experiencing something who is in themselves, like, I've noticed that you're not eating at lunch, to say in a big circle in front of people around them. That can make a person feel really embarrassed and feel really judged and feel really isolated as well. But instead, rather approaching it and saying, I've seen you being a bit quiet lately, or I've seen you haven't come out when it's lunchtime. Is there anything I can do, or is there something that you'd like to talk about? You're opening up a space for someone to feel comfortable to speak really openly as well. And I think that makes someone feel really connected, and it makes someone feel, okay, they may not understand me right now, but they're creating a space where I can feel like I'm able to speak and be a bit more vocal about what's going on. Because a lot of the time, things are focused on the behaviour side of things instead of focusing on the physical side of things, that people are quite afraid to speak openly about as well. So when you use those phrases and you create a dialogue for them to be a bit more open, that can create conversation and create a huge impact as well.
Yeah, just on the sibling front, I think if someone is struggling, it can be quite isolating for the person that's struggling. But if you have a sibling who's struggling, all of a sudden that can then become a challenge for them as well. And I think it's just being patient and open to the idea that the person who is struggling with the body image or the eating disorder, they might not fully know what's going on. They might not have the words or the language or even the thoughts really to articulate it yet, but the more that their family, their siblings, the people that are closest to them continue to show up to help them understand, or kind of understand at the same time as them, or in a stage behind them, it opens such a great stage for them to come back and talk about it when they feel ready. It might not be at the time, it might not be immediately, but just knowing that people are there and there's no judgment and there's just this open space where when they do feel comfortable, that's when so much positive change can really come, and they feel like they have the autonomy to speak up about it when they're ready, as opposed to, let's all talk about this now as a family so we can all work on it as a family. might not be at that stage yet, but for the person who's struggling to just know that that conversation is there when they're ready for it is massive.
Thank you. Helen.
Just on the issue of how might it affect siblings. When I first started working in the eating sort of field 20 years ago, it was typical to kind of silo the individuals. Individual therapy, people might have gone into hospital and they were seen by an individual therapist, and the siblings just weren't a part of it. But that has dramatically changed the way we treat it now, because eating is social. It's something one of the most social things we do, and it's a family thing. And so the approach now, so in eating disorders, for young people, is a family-based approach. Siblings are in the room during the therapy. It's not kept separate. Eating disorders and body image disorders thrive on secrecy. And so the communication and people knowing what's going on is important, because siblings are concerned. And if they're not told what's going on, they might sort of freak out even more, or they need to know, hey, mum and dad are doing something about this, and that can help settle them rather than just this unknown, like my sibling goes to this therapist, I know nothing about it, and are they getting better? So there has been a shift, and I think the concern about the contagious effect in the family, by having the family-based approach, actually helps manage that.
Just since we're talking about contagion, can you talk about contagion in schools and how that is managed, or? Look,
That's really tricky. I think it's really hard. You do see, and I've definitely seen it spread within a group. And it is hard because in the family, it's the parents and they can take charge. In the school, that's a lot trickier. So, I think, again, we can go back to dialogue, but the dialogue with your friends' parents. If you are concerned or keeping that amongst the parent chatting about it and saying, hey, what's going on and how do we promote this and what are we doing, and then being a group-based rather than each of these kids and families just kind of dealing with something and not even knowing necessarily the other family is dealing with the same thing. But it's very, very hard. Yeah. Thank you.
Look, I wanted now to throw open to Q&A from the audience, and give you a chance to surmise the panel any questions that you have. Now, I would like to just to set some expectations for this, because, as I said, people in this room have gone through a variety of experiences with this. This is, we're asking people not to sort of share deeply personal stories about perhaps their own children or own experiences, because I think what we're trying to do is just have a conversation at a high level. So,